I'd love to get like after the presentation, like a little bit of a roundtable for what everyone else does as well, because there'll be so many effective ideas based on anecdotal experience and different coaches' values. I think that's incredibly important. Like, and you'll see that with most business mentors, the effectiveness of the business mentor with the coach that they support actually is usually down to the aligning of values. So, for example, if you get a business mentor that's like, oh, yeah, like this is the most effective strategy that works for us, like a DM strategy where you're messaging 50 people in the DMs every single day and it's just a numbers thing on those conversations, like you either can facilitate that and that's something you will do, or that's literally hell on earth to you and you're not interested, right? And the effectiveness of that strategy is just down to whether the coach can fulfill it. Like it would be a very effective strategy, but ultimately it's down to you as an individual. So I'll share my personal ethos with like client acquisition, mostly because it's going to come from a pretty like authentic place. It's never something that I've spent tons and tons of time on and energy on. Yet client acquisition's never been a huge issue for me. So I'll kind of explain maybe why that might be and some things to consider, make sure there's no leaks in those areas. And then what we can do after the presentation is we can just roundtable, any overlapping things, whether it's social media marketing or whether it's gym floor walking, and how to start those conversations, how to sell within a consultation, all of those kinds of things. All right, cool. But let's start here. Client acquisition masterclass. Now, I will, caveat, preface this entire presentation by saying I am not the business savvy entrepreneur that's going to make you six figures. But I've run a successful coaching business for years, and I've year by year, I've only ever accumulated more wealth in my business. So, I feel like I'm in a pretty safe space nearly 8 years down the line as a coach to be able to turn around and go, okay, well, here's some client acquisition things to consider at least. So I think the first thing to kind of cover is client churn, right? Because we can't really talk about client acquisition ethically and also, I guess, strategically without talking about churn and retention. All right. So client churn, if you've not done it, if you've not looked into how your client turnover is, you're missing a massive part of client acquisition. You're missing a massive part of the mindset side of managing your business. Because if you don't know your numbers, you'll get stressed regardless, right? Even if you're one or two clients away from being at the ideal number of clients to bring in the income you need, you won't be aware of that because you're not tracking any data. All right. So much like we support our clients by knowing what their maintenance is, by getting them to track calories, track their food, etc., so that we can start navigating and targeting, it's the same with your business. And this is the client churn equation. So it's going to be essentially lost clients, which we can break down into both retired and dissatisfied clients, divided by the clients at the start of your time period. All right. Now, of course, if the clients at the start of your time period was high and the retired and dissatisfied clients was also high or higher, then that's a really bad position to be in, right? If your clients at the start of time period was moderate and your retired and dissatisfied clients that have left your business was very, very low, then that's actually not the worst position to be in. So you can start to use this client churn equation to kind of tell you how your retention is in your business. And the great thing about it is, as you'll see from the lower denominator, the time period can actually be stretched. So you could do it within a month, you could do it within a quarter, so 3 months, you could do it over 6 months, you could do it over 12, etc. So depending on what you want your ideal retention to be, you can start to grade and change the time period. So for example, if I wanted my retention to be a minimum of 6 months, then really I should be looking at clients that started with me 6 months ago and who's left since. Yeah. And that's going to be, the client churn that's ideal for my business. So I need to know what I want my retention to be. I think this is a really important place to start, because there's no point having that conversation around here's how you're going to gain new clients if you're not even retaining the ones that you've got, right? If your retention is poor, then your attention doesn't really want to, or doesn't, there is an element that still should be on acquiring new clients, but really most of your energy should be on, why is my client dissatisfaction so low? What do I need to improve within my business? How can I increase value? How can I increase perceived value? How can I improve the experience of the client? All of that stuff. All right. And that's going to come into your coaching deliverables. It's going to be the value you provide, the check-ins, the sessions, the conversations, etc. All right. Cool. If your retention's really good, then all you really need to focus on is just getting some new clients through the door. All right. Something that I think will help give you a picture, because again, when you're working out your client churn, you won't really know what's good and what's bad, is just a little bit of like a customer retention by industry chart. I think this is 2020, this will be 2023. So I think this is 2022 or 2021. All right. On average, this is the customer retention in most services, or most industries, sorry. Right. So if you think, and I always find this hard, I don't know if you guys do, like when you're signing up to a company or whatever, and it asks you what industry you work in, there's never one for like the fitness industry. So you're always like, oh, do I put myself in professional services or do I put myself in healthcare? Because I'm not a doctor, but I do work in healthcare. So anyway, regardless of like what, it's not about running yourself in line with the industry. It's just about knowing that most industry standards fall kind of between about 55% to 80%. All right. So if you're running, and I think this is really, really important, because if you're running above 75%, then actually you're doing very, very well. All right. So if you do your client churn equation and you turn that decimal into a percentage, then you'll see kind of how you stack up compared to other industries. And you'll know that if you're running below 60%, then you probably have room for improvement. All right. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an impression of where you need to focus. Cool. So client retention. You'll all obviously probably know this already, but client retention is a money saving strategy. It's always going to cost you more to acquire a new client than it will be to retain an old one. All right, every single time. That's because the time and energy that you put in to acquire that new client through conversations, relationships being built, marketing yourself, all the time that you invest in that costs you money, right? If you invested that same energy into delivering to your clients and kept them on board for longer, well, that's not going to cost you anything. It's just the same part of the service that you're already delivering. So it's important to remember that client retention is always going to be a money saving strategy. All right. And much like building wealth, you need to know as much about saving as you do about spending. All right. So think of it like client acquisition is spending and client retention is saving. All right. I'll always preference and bias client retention. I'm not really a sales guy, but as long as like my clients are in a fairly okay place, like they're happy, that's the main thing to me. All right. And the key strategy for client retention, in my opinion, isn't about systemizing. It's not about giving the same thing to everyone. It's about just giving that person what they need. If there is strong evidence that that client is very unclear and they're a little bit on like rocky ground, just talk to them. Just keep talking to them. Like offer them conversation. If it's online, offer them a call, but like talk to them until there's a little bit more clarity. And then once there is a bit more clarity, just latch on to what they need to do in order to move themselves forward. Now, of course, there's always going to be the occasional client that there's just not really too much to latch onto. Maybe it's the wrong time and place. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's that you've offered call after call after call, but there's just nothing that's moving in the right direction. There's always going to be the occasional client that drops off your service. That is just the way it is. But for the most part, most issues can be resolved if you increase communication, right? The quality and consistency of communication. So if you are having any client retention issues, which I know most of you guys are like great coaches, so I don't see that being a massive problem. But if you do, and you don't do notice that, the first thing to check in with is, how's my communication with these guys? Have I let that fall by the wayside? And just pick that up. That's it. Just pick it up. Okay. So when it comes to sales and client acquisition, I will always fall back to this structure. I'll always follow back to the same things, which is the client or the prospect needs to know, like, and trust you, right? Every single time, regardless of whether that's on the gym floor or whether that's online, they still need to go through the same process, right? If they don't know you, they're not going to buy from you ever. So if you get maybe if they know the company, then you might get away with it being under the brand of another company. So, for example, some PT clients joined M10 and they didn't know me as a coach, but they knew M10 and they liked M10. They liked the ethos of M10 and thus they trusted M10. So when I went into the consult with them, I still signed them up. If you're running on your own, not under a brand of any kind, so either online or in your own studio space or whatever, the client needs to know, like, and trust you. It's going to be very hard to sign someone up for a long-term great result if they don't know, like, and trust you. All right. So if at any point you're having conversation with someone and you don't get the impression that they know, like, or trust you, don't try and sell to them. Don't try and get them on a call. It's a waste of time. Right. Just try to get them to know you. And then as that conversation evolves, they like you. So on the gym floor, it's, having common ground. It's talking about dogs and football and what they did at the weekend or whatever. But when they get to that point where they're coming up to you and talking to you because they like you, they like your energy, blah, blah, blah. Same online. It's in the DMs. It's always in the DMs. And this isn't about cold DMing. It's not about messaging. And this is cold DMing is trying to sell someone that doesn't know, like, or trust you, right? That's why people hate it so much, because you're messaging a stranger saying, do you need any help? Can I blah, blah, blah. That's stupid. Get to know them first. Get to know who they are, right? Build that conversation over time until they interact with your stuff. You like their stuff. They like yours. You comment on their stuff. They comment on yours. They engage with your stories. They message you on Instagram when they need something, all of that stuff. Then that kind of is the point where they trust you. And when they trust you, they're far, far more likely to buy from you. I used to run the sales for the PT mentorship back in the day. And out of all the performance coaches, so there was me, Anthony, Joade, I can't remember if Joe was doing it at the time. I always had the highest rate of sales, right? Because I never started that sales call with a sale. I always started with just getting to know who they were. I was just talking to them for 30 minutes. And throughout that process, I learned a lot about who they were, what they were about, what they valued, where their business was, all of that stuff, because I was just asking questions, getting to know them. And then at the end, it's very easy to sell to someone when you know their problem and you have the solution. Super easy to sell. But we'll cover that on the discovery call, right? So think know, like, and trust. Then you go into your lead gen strategies. This is how you're going to build that know, like, and trust, right? Now, think about this, whether you're on the gym floor or whether you're online, on social media, you've got an email list, you're doing YouTube videos, the same things apply. The exact same things apply regardless, right? So when you're lead genning, you need to provide value every single time. So if you're on the gym floor as a PT, it needs to be providing value to members, solving their problems, giving them solutions, giving them tools. I always resonated with that thing that Alex Hormozy said, where it's like, make your free shit better than everyone else's paid shit, right? So many coaches hold their cards close to their chest. But if you actually just give your shit away for free, talk to people, give it all away. When people pay for coaching, they're not paying for the behind the scenes stuff. They're just paying for the accountability for you, because they know who you are now and they know that you can get the result. Then you want something personal. Like, again, I do believe that your personal brand is coherent with your professional brand. Like, if they don't know who you are, they don't know anything about your personal life, I feel like they're just a little less likely to buy. When people are a bit more vulnerable, when coaches put themselves online a little bit more, show what physical journey they're going through, show a little bit of their family life or how they spend their weekends, etc., it just starts to build that connection. It's just a little bit more of an element. You know, out of all the conversations I've had on social media, the stuff that's always generated the most conversation is the personal stuff. It's always the personal stuff. It's the stuff where I'm showing that I'm volunteering at a dog shelter, or it's, that I'm going to this restaurant, or I'm traveling here. People are straight ready to talk to you about those things. But if you start with fitness, people close up because they're like, fuck, I know he's going to sell to me, so I'm going to stay away. But if I'm talking about dogs, no one's going to go, oh, he's going to sell coaching to me. We're just talking about dogs, But eventually that conversation 2 weeks down the line leads somewhere. All right. The next one is always going to be social proof. Like, if you've not got evidence that you can deliver that result, the likelihood of you selling that package is going to be lower, right? Now, if you don't have many clients that have gone through transformations before and afters, etc., get testimonials, that's still social proof. If you can't get many testimonials because your clients are introverted and they really struggle to, send those testimonials through, then show your own journey, show your own result, because that's still social proof. You'd be surprised how many people look at your result and go, oh yeah, they can get me a result because they're in shape. Like, it's ridiculous that people think that, but that's just the way it is. So social proof is always going to be something we need to cycle through. So when we're posting on social media, it's rotating through these three things all the time. That's all I do. If you look back at my social media, it's always just these three being rotated. I post a result, then I post some form of conceptual value, then I post something personal, and I post a result. And it's just the same thing over and over. Conversation is the missed link. A lot of people think clients come from your posts on social media. I've literally very rarely, if ever, had someone join my service because of a post, unless it was like a selling post where I was like, I'm looking for 5 people that want to achieve X result, blah, blah, blah. Unless it was a selling post, no one ever has come to my social media asking for a coaching service, right? That's always been generated from conversation, where the seed has been planted and you nurture it over time. And then, you get to a point where they are ready, and you jump on that call, etc. But that conversation is so vital. You can't just keep throwing stuff at people and not get any feedback. So you need to start conversation. I was speaking to one of our coaches the other day about who you follow on social media. Like, unless coaches are your ideal demographic, you want to follow more clients than you do coaches, right? Coaches are my demographic. Basically, most of the people I follow are coaches because that's who I coach, right? For you guys, you need to be following Gen Pop. Right? If you're not following Gen Pop, or if you're not following your demographic, then you're missing the boat, because all you're doing is interacting with other coaches, and then you wonder why no one's buying your coaching, right? Like, think about going on your company's followers. So if you work for Virgin Active or wherever, or the gym that you train in, go into their followers and just follow everyone that fits your demographic. If you're a PT, local coffee shops near your gym, go onto their page, look at who's putting stories on, follow them. Look at who's following them, follow them, right? And then whoever follows back, start to engage with their stuff, like their stuff, comment, blah, blah, blah. All right. And that will start conversation. All right. If it's online coaching, then start following your demographic who follow maybe other coaches, right? So for me, who do you think I'm going to follow? It's going to be people that follow M10 and Coaching Concierge, because they're coaches that are invested in their education. Perfect demographic for me, right? So I'm going to follow those guys, right? And then whoever follows me back, generate a bit of conversation with them. Oh, thanks for the follow, dude. Great to see another coach doing awesome things in the industry. You're just trying to start a conversation. Don't make it selly in any way. And then over time, you just build that conversation, right? You start to learn a bit more about them. So that's all your lead gen needs to be, whether it's email lists, social media, gym floor walk-in. The last thing I'll say about lead gen is it needs to be within your skill set. If you're good at writing, email lists are perfect, right? If you're good at videos, then social media is going to be spot on, or photos, etc. If you're good at writing, you might be able to caption stuff really well. So you just need to find a way to generate that where you can play to your strength, right? But I don't like this idea where everyone's trying to do everything. Like if you're not good at videos, work on that as like a side hustle, but don't make that your main form of lead generation. You're not good at it. Work on it in the background, but don't make it your main form of lead gen, right? Because it's going to take a long time to get good at it. So there's no point like trying to make it your main lead gen now. Okay, coaching clarity. So this is really talking about your niche, right? If you're not clear on your niche, then you need to think about, and we've talked about this before in defining your niche on the Notion library, but you need to think about who you love working with, who you can get a result with, and who can afford your service. If they tick all three boxes, then they're pretty much your demographic, right? Now, more often than not, you're either shooting for clients that fit two of those three, and that's why you're struggling. So either you can get them a result and they can afford you, but you don't like working with them unless you're not motivated to start those conversations. You're not interested because you don't like working with them, or you like working with them and you can get them a result, but they can't afford your prices, right? In which case you need to choose a different demographic, because if you're always trying to sell to someone who can't afford your service, you're always going to struggle, right? Don't choose a 19-year-old student as a demographic. You might love working with them and get them great results, but they probably can't afford your service, right? So if they tick those three boxes, then they're more likely going to be your demographic. And once you've got that clarity on who you serve, your message becomes clearer. We all know that. We've heard it a million times before from everyone else that talks on social media. Like, if you want your message to be clear, then you need to have clarity on who you serve. If you're ever in doubt about this, the best place to start is think about you 3 to 5 years ago. That's probably the easiest demographic for you at that moment in time, because they probably want to be where you are, and you have gone over the exact same hurdles that they have, or they have right now, so you can help them over those. Right. So it's just an easier way to be. But once you've got that clarity, you're going to find it much easier to put a message out there that's consistent. Yeah. So discovery calls are something that I only really started applying this year. And since doing them, my conversion rate has basically gone up to like 95%. Because within that conversation, like I said, when I was running them for the BT mentorship, it was a very similar structure. But when you're running these, if you build rapport, if you build that relationship with the client, by the end of the conversation, there's not really a question about, what do you charge or whatever else. Maybe there's a little bit if that's their biggest barrier, but in reality, no one's asking that because they know you're the right person. They know you're the right fit. But the key way to get there is to know what their ideal goal is and to give them a brief roadmap of how you're going to deliver it. Talk about their barriers, talk about potential solutions, and then you essentially want to get to the end of the call and you say, cool, so we know you want to be here. And based on what we've gone through, this is probably the right solution for now, at least for the first 30 days or so. And you say to the client, does that make sense? Can you see yourself getting to that goal? And they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that tangibly. It's like, all right, great. Here's how much I am. I've got these two prices. Which sounds best for you? And it's just closing really, really smoothly. And again, like I'm not a salesperson. I'm not like a fucking closer or whatever they're called. But I've done this successfully for long enough to know that if you get someone on and take them through that journey, it's very, very easy to sell on the other side. And if they ever come back with, to be honest, that just sounds a little bit out of my price range, then you just say this. All right, well, that's fine. but I can't do it for less. I could do it for more. I can't do it for less. All right. It's one of my favorite quotes from Alex Hormozy. Ultimately, they become out of your demographic. Remember, we had 3 things that define your niche. The last one is that they can afford your service. If you get to the end of that call and they say, oh, to be honest, it just sounds a little bit out of my price range, then they're not your demographic anymore. They've just taken themselves out of that pre-qualification, right? In which case you hold your hands up and you go, okay, cool. Sorry to hear that. Is there any way that you can save up for a few months? I know that, times are tight, it's Christmas. What if we, take a deposit and lock you in for January? Or if you saved up for a couple of months, do you think you could afford my service in February? Oh yeah, maybe, blah, blah, blah. Worst comes to worst. If someone doesn't join your service, then you just provide free value. You've given them a roadmap on that call, right? So if they don't join, you've still provided a huge amount of value to them. Right. One of my favorite things to do is after the call, regardless of whether they've signed up or not, because I don't take payment on the phone, is I'll send them an email summary now of the proposal. So I'll send them an email summary of like, this is what I gathered from our call. This is where I see our initial phase being. So phase 1 might be this, phase 2 might be this. Very, very loose timeframes, etc. And it's just a nice way of finishing that last bit of interaction with the client, because they're like, fucking hell, this person's written up like my plan of action basically within the last 20 minutes. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is essentially where we need to take confidence in our service and the fact that we are worth what we charge, right? For any of you guys that are falling into the trap of dropping your prices, when a client comes up with a barrier or when they say they can't afford it, etc., that's the biggest flaw in your business, because that means that you're not confident in what you deliver, right? And above all else, the biggest limiting factor to your sales is going to be your confidence, right? So if any of you guys find yourselves dropping your prices, it ironically becomes the biggest flaw in your business. It becomes the biggest flaw in your sales, right? Confidence above all else is going to land you more sales, right? Because you're more confident to turn around to the client and say, okay, can we overcome this barrier now? Okay, give me examples of how we can find potential solutions to that. Like, you're very confident in overcoming clients' barriers when they're coaching with you. They provide barriers to them dieting, etc. So you just need to do the same to their sales, right? And it's essentially moving them along for anyone that knows it, the trans-theoretical model, the stages of change. It's about moving them along the stages of change, because if they come and they say, I don't know if I can afford your prices, blah, blah, blah. They're on a sales call. Of course they can afford your prices, otherwise they won't be on a sales call. Chances are they are in a position where they're still in contemplation, where they don't see the value in your service yet, in which case our job is to overcome that.